You gon' push me to my breaking point, that's a hard fact. We had an agreement, you got greedy, then you double back. That's a no-no, it don't work like that. We were friends, knowing me, how you thought you'd get away with that? If you switching up, I might have to switch your little face up. Right hand to the gavel, either way I'm getting caked up. Lying in the sand, pretty boy, what you made of? I can flip your shit, take your chick and your pay stub. I don't play the field, I hit my Dougie from the skybox. Playing with my funds, it get ugly like a cyclops. My God, I ain't been this livid since my dad kicked me out the house. We had an agreement, now you tryna give the runaround. Bad move, you shouldn't have done me like that. You pay the price, don't take advice, make bad moves. The wrong move, you could've played your cards right, now it's bad news. You acting like a bitch, grade A, it's time to ride, you better make way. Yeah, when it comes to this, I don't take breaks, and because of this, I need a pay raise. I gotta ask myself for a pay raise. Hey Nate, what do you say, mate? Well shit, dog, you a real boss, and that gross looking like it made weight. So okay, wait, tell me how you gonna get rid of the body you got in front of you. Probably should get a shot and put a hole through his body. Like it to do is a hobby, like do, get the fuck out of here. But I might do him different from a gut check, cause if he do die, then I'm a suspect, so
Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and you didn't think you were going to get away without hearing my sweet voice in this video, did you? This magnificent R8 V10 in the white and carbon fiber finish combination is owned by a repeat client of mine. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet and a massive Audi fan. And after seeing the results and finish I obtained on his RS4, he felt more than confident in entrusting me with his Pride and Joy R8, which brings us to this video. So as you would have partially seen, the car was given a pre-inspection assessment, a thorough wash and chemical decontamination, blown dry and a final IPA wipe down in preparation for the paint correction work that's about to take place. The simplest way to explain what I'm trying to achieve during the wash and decontamination stages is to be left with nothing but clean bare paint and trims. So I don't want any dirt, traffic film, environmental fallout and existing waxes or sealants remaining on the vehicle when I put my polisher to the paint. And I also don't want any detergents or chemical residue left behind, which is why the IPA or alcohol panel wipe is so vital for the final decontamination step. So that's what I'm trying to achieve, and the simplest way to explain why I'm trying to achieve that is because if I don't have the cleanest and barest paint possible, it's always going to negatively affect the paint correction stage, as that remaining grime, fallout, older waxes and sealants, as well as that chemical residue, gets into my polishing pads and changes the way my compounds work, also potentially marring and degrading the paint and finish. So with what I'm trying to achieve and why I'm trying to achieve it explained, that just leaves how I achieve that. The best way to explain how is by gently stripping away layers. So for example, the first layer could be the looser dirt, the second layer the more stubborn grime, the third layer the baked on traffic film and fallout, the fourth layer the existing waxes and sealants, and so on. And the reason why I don't want to attack these layers all at once is because it's just too aggressive on the paint and trims, leading to me damaging the paint even further. There's three key principles I teach in my detailing classes, which applies to every aspect of automotive detailing, which are firstly effectiveness, in this case meaning that I want to achieve my goal in stripping the paint and trims clean and bare. Secondly is efficiency, meaning that I don't want to necessarily waste time or products beyond what is required for each specific vehicle. And thirdly is safety, meaning that I don't want to further damage the vehicle's paint or trims by being too aggressive in either my technique or choice of products. And regardless of whether it's surface preparation, paint correction, or even interior detailing, I'm always trying to find that balance of working effectively, efficiently, and safely. Now, I've actually detailed a couple of Audi R8s in the past, but I have to say that the paint thickness on this one was definitely much thinner than the others, and definitely a little worrying in certain places where the readings were well below 70 microns, especially around the panel edges and around some of the badges. So based on my post-decontamination inspection and readings, the paint is pretty much all original with the exception of the front bumper, so this leads me to believe that someone or someones definitely quite aggressively compounded this paint in the past, especially in certain areas as the clear coat is dangerously thin. And this definitely adds an extra layer of stress and caution on my part, as I obviously want to deliver the best possible results to my client. But there's really nothing worse than burning through the paint, especially on an original factory finish and rare car. So throughout this detail, you'll actually see me change some of my methods, combinations and techniques based on how much clear coat I have to work with, which on this car was anywhere from a scary thin 60 microns to quite a comfortable 120 microns depending on the panel section and area. Just to make things even more challenging, or let's say interesting, hopefully you can see that the paint needs quite a bit of work to put it nicely. Now I just want you guys to appreciate that white is definitely one of the hardest colours to see scratches and defects, and a far more difficult colour to capture defects on camera. But due to the severity of the swirls, deeper scratches, water spots and oxidation, I actually didn't struggle too much in capturing them on film. And as you guys have a look at some of the carbon fiber and piano plastic trims, you should be able to see that this paint really does need some major paint correction work to restore that factory finish. So let's get to it with the first test section using a medium compound in the form of Shell Concepts S20 Black on an intermediate polishing pad in the form of the Lake Country Orange HDO foam pad on the new Rupes LHR15 Mark III polisher. Now, I've actually detailed a lot of Audis in my time, and one thing that's been true about all of them is that they tend to have hard paint. So my guess is that this relatively gentle cutting combination isn't going to be able to address these more severe defects. However, that really doesn't change the fact that it's always best to start with the least aggressive method that has the potential to work. And although it's a bit of a long shot based on my previous experience, this combination still does have the possibility of working. Plus add the fact that the paint is dangerously thin in certain areas, and it's really in my best interest to find the least aggressive combination possible. Now, as we have a look at the results, I have to say that I removed a lot more of the defects than I anticipated with this combination, with a good 70% or so eliminated. And as I have a look at the finish, I can also see that the gloss level and clarity of the paint has also been massively improved, having a much richer and warmer tone of white. So, although I actually got more defect removal than I expected, it's still not to an acceptable level to my standard. But as a finishing combination, this could actually work extremely well to restore gloss and clarity. So seeing that I still had a good 30% or so of the defects to remove, compared to the first combination, I stepped up to a slightly more aggressive light coating combination in the form of NV Precision Compound on the Lake Country Blue HDO foam pad. Now, one thing you need to understand about automotive paint correction is that the first 50% of defects are much easier to remove than the remaining 50%. So although I only have 30% of the defects remaining in the first test section, it doesn't mean that I only need 30% more aggression or cut to remove them. In fact, it means I need more like 100% more cut just to remove that remaining 30%, if that makes sense. The thing about the remaining defects after you've done a pass of your machine is that they're always the deepest and most difficult to remove. So the second combination I'm using isn't just a slight jump in cutting ability, but more of a full jump in both the pads and compounds leveling abilities, though it's still more of a light cutting combination compared to some of the more aggressive ones I have available. Now, looking at the results in this second test section, I can see that I've removed at least 95% of the existing defects, if not more, which I'm more than happy with and quite honestly once again surprised. Which leads me to believe that although there's no doubting that it's a harder paint, it's definitely not a rock hard clear coat, but more of a mid to hard paint. Which is further confirmed when I start to have a look at the finish, which has a lot more compounding haze than the first section, meaning that although this combination looks like a winner in relation to cut and defect removal, I'll still need a more gentle combination to eliminate the haze and restore gloss and clarity. You should also be able to see some light pinhole marks scattered in the finish, which I've talked a lot about in previous videos, but the quick summary is that you can actually largely remove or reduce them, but it will mean that you'll have to be far more aggressive in leveling down the paint in order to do so, which I don't think I need to say, it just isn't an option for this particular car and paint. So seeing that I don't need to resort to using any more aggressive wool or microfiber pads or compounds, and that I'm happy with the cutting level of this second combination, my next step was to work out the best second finishing step combination that would be needed to restore gloss to the finish. For this third test, I went back to the Lake Country Orange HDO foam pad, but this time used it with an even finer polish in the form of NV Finesse. Now, as you'll hopefully see, although I slightly improved the finish, I actually wasn't able to remove the majority of the compounding haze with this combination. Now, the reason for this in my experience is basically because the paint is a little too hard to respond or to be affected by such a light polish and pad combination. So continuing based on this past experience, I went back to my very first combination, once again using the same orange pad with the medium Shell Concepts S20 Black compound. And as you'll hopefully see, it worked perfectly to eliminate that compounding haze and restore maximum gloss and clarity. So it's really important to understand that whether any combination initially works well or not, it's still always giving you valuable information about the paint type and its defects that may in fact come in handy at a later stage of your testing. So with my first step cutting and second step finishing combinations all sorted out, it was basically time to get to work and start correcting all the paint on the vehicle. Now generally when it comes to my paint correction working method, it's split into two areas, which is firstly edge work, which relates to the finer and more risky panel edges, seams and intricate areas using my smaller 3, 2 and 1 inch pads and machines. And secondly the flat work, which relates to the larger, flatter areas of the car using my larger 5 and 6 inch pads and machines. In my experience, the edge work takes far longer and is far more stressful, especially when working on thinner paints. So it's usually what I like to do first on each panel, but quite honestly, it really doesn't matter which you do first. What does matter is that you always find that balance of being effective, efficient and safe, especially when it comes to your edge work. As if you're too aggressive, you will burn through an edge quite easily, but if you're too gentle, you just won't achieve a high level of correction, or you'll just end up taking forever and not working efficiently. In the end, there's really no one formula that applies to every car or situation, which is what makes detailing and paint correction both challenging and ever changing. But the one thing that stays true throughout all my jobs is that effectiveness, efficiency and safety rule. few other things that may be worth a mention in general is that you'll see me use slightly faster machine speeds with slightly slower arm movements and more pressure and passes during the first cutting stage, and then you'll see me switch to a slower machine speed with faster arm movements and less downward pressure and quicker polishing cycles for the second finishing stage. Although there's always exceptions, you generally need a more aggressive technique when it comes to cutting or leveling down existing defects, whereas you generally need a less aggressive technique when it comes to eliminating minor compounding marring and haze, which is why I tend to adjust my technique depending on the situation and goal at hand. And even further beyond that, I'll always need to adjust even further to the specific car and its challenges. For this particular car, it's its inconsistent paint thickness variations, so in some of the areas I had no choice but to do a very quick run with my polisher over the paint and leave it at that. Though in most other areas I could definitely achieve close to 100% defect removal. So with the bonnet of this Audi R8, both compounded and polished, hopefully you can see just what a massive improvement I was able to achieve. Now for some reason the paint around the Audi badge was super thin, so I had to just resort to giving it a quick hand polish and leaving it at that. But with that and the scattered pinhole defects aside, I think it came up amazingly well with all things considered, and easily a good 95% plus defect removal with outstanding clarity and gloss, which I just couldn't be more happy with. Now, as I've mentioned in just about every full detailing video that I do, I almost always polish the glass on every vehicle I detail. Polishing glass can not only remove defects such as water spots and very light swirls, but it's also the best way to give the glass a super effective clean. And the great thing about glass is that it's super hard compared to paint. So you don't need to worry at all about things like micro marring and haze, because just about any compound and pad you use will always finish perfectly. So I really don't need to overthink it when it comes to glass. And I just use the same combination that I'm using on the paint to also polish and deep clean the glass. But if I'm faced with some really stubborn and deep water spot etchings, I'll generally switch to a wool pad with a heavy cutting compound on my rotary, which tends to do the job. Now when it comes to deeper scratches on glass, it's honestly not something I pursue due to the time versus risk versus potential outcome. You need to appreciate that glass isn't just a little harder than your car paint, it's extremely harder, and in my experience even harder than trying to remove scratches in metal trims. There actually are guys that I've used in the past to remove scratches from glass that use diamond cutting discs to level down glass with varying success and outcomes. But in my honest opinion, if the replacement glass is available and reasonably priced, replacing it, if it's badly scratched, may be the best option, followed by a glass polishing specialist. Now as we have a look at correcting the paint on the roof and pillar arches, it's fairly similar to the bonnet by using my smaller polishers and pads to do the edge work, followed by my larger polishers for the flat work. I've also tried to include a bunch of 50-50 before and after shots throughout this whole detail, so you guys can see for yourselves the results that were being achieved throughout this entire job. Now, when it comes to some of the more diverse substrates, such as painted plastics, fiberglass, carbon fiber, head and tail lights, and piano plastic trims, it's always a case-by-case scenario in my experience. The fact is that in the past, car paint as a whole was just far more consistent because cars were pretty much made of very similar materials and painted and finished in the same place. But these days I'm finding more and more that car manufacturers are having certain trims and panels made elsewhere, having varying levels of diverse paints and finishes, which from a detailing perspective creates a lot more variables and inconsistencies. But if I was to generalize how plastics and certain fiber-based panels and trims differ from metal, it's that it's usually a lot harder to remove the defects from areas such as plastic bumpers and fiberglass or carbon fiber trims and panels. And a lot of the time it can also be a lot more difficult to finish down perfectly on these trims compared to a metal substrate. I think part of it comes down to how metal disperses heat more evenly and conducts it slowly throughout the panel, while plastic and fiber-based substrates tend to just build the heat in the one area that you're polishing without the ability to disperse the heat more evenly. Another factor could be the flex that some of these panels have, making it more difficult to apply and sustain the same amount of pressure that you'd have on a firmer and stiffer metal substrate, though depending on the specific material, that's not always the case. But in any case, and also based on the fact that historically automotive compounds, pads and machines have been engineered to work on painted metal and not plastics or diverse fibers, I've generally found that it's always more time consuming and difficult working on these newer substrate materials. But perhaps as cars continue to evolve and we see less metal and more synthetic materials used by car manufacturers, automotive detailing products will also need to evolve and adapt their products to better suit this newer technology. But in relation to this R8, I basically found that I just needed an extra set of passes or so to correct the defects on the white painted plastics and fiber trims, while my finishing combination was pretty much identical to working on the metal surfaces. Now when it comes to modern head and tail lights, it's important to understand that they're all clear coated just like your car's paint. But as I mentioned before, chances are that the car's lights are sourced and clear coated separately from the car. So in many cases it may be a very different clear coat to the one on the actual vehicle. In most cases I'll just try the same combination that I'm using on the paint, and about half of the time, as was the case here, it works perfectly. But in the other half of the cases where the clear coat on the lights turns out to be much harder or softer, I'll just try a couple of diverse combinations until I find the right one that both cuts and finishes well. Now over the last 5 years or so, these high gloss piano black plastic trims have become increasingly popular, finding their way on almost every second vehicle out there. And although they look great when they're new, they have to be the most sensitive and scratch prone material in history found on cars. But unlike a lot of the other plastic and fibre based materials I discussed earlier that are harder to remove the defects from, these are actually so soft that removing the defects is generally not an issue. However, trying to achieve a perfect haze-free, high-gloss finish can sometimes be quite a challenge due to their extremely sensitive surface. But in general, you really want to work quite quickly with short polishing cycles and minimal pressure and heat. But the biggest issue, apart from correcting them, is maintaining them. And apart from putting some paint protection film over them, the truth is that nothing's going to stop them from getting scratched up. So it would be nice if car manufacturers could address this issue, as it is possible to have gloss black clear coated trims that aren't so soft. But the truth is that once the car sale's made, they probably really don't care unless it's a recallable financial issue.
Yeah.
Now in my experience, clear-coated carbon fibre trims and panels have been one of the most difficult surfaces to remove existing defects. So a lot of the time, I actually do switch to a more aggressive cutting combination to effectively level down the defects. While in general, I've found that finishing on carbon fibre substrates with perfect clarity hasn't been much of an issue at all. But as I've mentioned numerous times in this video, every car and its paint is different. And in this particular case, the same combination that I used on the rest of the car worked perfectly on these carbon fibre trims. correction work done and dusted, that finally brings us to the paint protection stage and the ceramic coating of choice for this job, which was Nova Evo. Now, it was a cold and chilly Melbourne winter's morning when I applied it, and as Nova Evo is already quite a slow curing and flashing coating, the weather made it even slower. And after a bit of testing and analysing the optimal flash and wipe off times, I worked out that it was a good 8 to 10 minutes after application. So to adapt my technique to my environment and to also try and work as efficiently as possible, I started applying the coating to 3 to 4 sections at once before coming back to do the wipe and level down process, and that seemed to work perfectly. But a few things that are important to note about the new formulation of Nova Evo is that the wipe off is now even easier and smoother than ever. But more importantly, it now creates an instant bond to the paint. So although it may be advantageous from a user perspective to give it a little more time to flash, making the wipe off even easier, there's really no way of stuffing up the application as it immediately creates that instant bond to the paint. So unless the weather is extremely cold, you could effectively apply it and then immediately wipe it off with no issues. And the fact that it is a slower curing coating means that even in extreme hotter climates, you could potentially leave it on for a little longer without any issues and still have a nice and easy wipe off. For someone that's been applying ceramic coatings for almost a decade now, I've watched them become not only superior in relation to their performance and durability, but also so much nicer and easier to apply throughout the years, which is just fantastic to see. And it really does open them up like never before to the average consumer to use them without all the headaches and difficulties that they used to have. And in my opinion, they're only going to get better and better as time goes by. Now, a few tips I can offer when applying coatings in general is to firstly, as I mentioned, adapt to your environment. So in colder climates, you generally need to wait a little longer for the coating to flash before you level or wipe it down with your microfiber cloth. Whereas in hotter climates, it tends to flash far more rapidly and sometimes even immediately, so it becomes more of a wipe on and immediately wipe off procedure. And try to avoid using strong, harsh, direct lighting as that tends to flood the coating and wash it out, whereas soft, diffused and bouncing light is perfect for exposing the coating's flashing times, as well as exposing high spots or areas you may have missed during the wipe off. And if you have an overcast day outside, that lighting is absolutely perfect for checking your coating's finish. Always use 2 clean, quality microfiber cloths. Your first cloth should be used to pick up the majority of the excess coating, and your second cloth to finish down streak-free. Turn your cloths to a clean section after every few sections and replace them with new cloths once you've used them all up. Always take the time to thoroughly check each panel once you're done before you move on to the next one. And the general rule is that once you feel that you've wiped the panel down perfectly, give it another final wipe as your insurance policy against any missed high spots or streaks. Now, you can use just about any ceramic coating on any area of your vehicle's exterior, including plastics, rubbers, metals, rims, and even glass. The only exception is glass with wipers, as the wipers tend to prematurely diminish the coating, so a more specific glass coating is a better option in those areas. And although the microspade cloth wrapped around a foam block is a fantastic applicator for coatings, don't feel that you'll always have to stick to it, as for more intricate areas, you can actually just use the cloth on its own and even other applicators such as foam pads and brushes. Now in truth, the owner of this car actually didn't opt for the ceramic coating on the R8. But seeing that he's a great loyal customer, I decided to throw it in at no extra charge, because I wanted him to experience the fantastic benefits that a quality ceramic coating can provide when it's applied correctly to well-prepared paint. So maybe in the future, after he's experienced firsthand the ease of cleaning and longevity of a coating, he may in fact go for it when the time comes. All in all, this detailing job was a good 40 hours of work from start to finish, beginning in the wash bay with the decontamination process, moving on to the bulk of the work in the paint correction bay, and finishing up here in the coating bay for the final stage of protection. I'll be honest in saying that I don't always necessarily enjoy every single aspect of the detailing process, and especially the added stress of working on paint that's been previously abused by negligent detailers who just remove way too much paint or clear coat that's just not necessary and completely unprofessional and uncalled for. And what's more, it really makes life hard for the next detailer who has to correct what little paint they've left behind. But what I do always enjoy and love is the satisfaction and pride I have in the work that I produce, and knowing that I've always done the best that I can, given what I have to work with. The final bit of joy I get from my job is that look on the customer's face when they're just blown away by the results and just so happy and grateful. And ultimately, that's what really makes all the hard work and stress worthwhile. I'll leave you guys while we finish up the coating stage, and there'll be some final shots of this absolutely beautiful and magnificent Audi R8 V10 at the end. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show your support for these videos, and I'll see you guys soon.
Still a bit of good, so good. seem to find what I'm really trying to get. Reason right, let's take our time and choose whether we green or yellow, whether we deep or shallow. Please me now, 'cause we're about to lose. Whether we buy or hello, whether we stay or Jell-O. Sometimes, funny me, you put a little bit of gasoline. I burned out, so to speak. Come a little closer. Here's some disclosure. Do you mind to quit your pretending? Truth or false, this shit never ending. Hear me now and stop condescending. You see, I'm begging, you hear me begging. If you're sick for love, don't try to hide it. Find it deep inside and try to hide it. If there's a way, I wanna know we tried it. Quit your games and now that you denied it. Losing this game, I can't afford to be losing this game. And I know you deserve respect. Losing my mind, can't find the words. No, I can't seem to find what I'm really trying to get. Reason right, let's take our time and choose whether we're green or yellow, whether we deep or shallow. Please me now, 'cause we're about to lose. Whether we buy or hello, whether we stay or Jell-O. I got rules.